Welcome back to my YouTube channel where the rare, the legendary, and the utterly unexpected come together in the most unbelievable stories surrounding coins that seem ordinary until they aren't. Today we're diving into a coin that might seem far too recent to be valuable, far too modern to be mythical, and far too common to be hiding a secret. But as we've learned time and time again, history often saves its most fascinating tales for the moments we least expect. This is the mind-blowing journey of the 2002 D1 cent coin, a coin struck at the Denver Mint, circulated in the millions, overlooked by collectors for years, until one specimen surfaced that turned the numismatic world upside down. Not because it was old, or flashy, or encrusted in diamonds, but because it was one of a kind, a complete anomaly in design, composition, and origin, whose value skyrocketed beyond anyone's wildest imagination. A single penny from 2002 that would go on to be appraised at $351 million and spark debates, investigations, and revelations that changed how collectors and historians viewed 21st century American coinage forever. The journey of this penny begins not in a vault or a collector's cabinet, but in the back of a worn-out pickup truck in rural Kansas. It was 2017. A man named Thomas Greer, a retired welder and casual metal detector hobbyist, was helping a friend clean out an old barn that had belonged to his late grandfather. Amid the old tools, rusted cans, and forgotten drawers, Thomas found a coffee tin filled with change. Not unusual. Just everyday coins, mostly pennies, collected over time. But one coin at the very bottom of the tin caught his eye. It didn't shine quite like the others. It had a darker hue, a different sound when dropped, and a peculiar texture that made him pause. At first, he thought it was foreign. The date said 2002, and the mint mark was a small d. But the surface had a smoothness, a flawless depth to its features, that didn't match any penny he'd ever handled. Thinking little of it, Thomas tossed the penny in his pocket and brought it home. Days later, out of curiosity, he showed it to a local coin dealer, who initially dismissed it as a simple error coin, perhaps a misstrike or a plating issue. But the moment the coin was placed under magnification, everything changed. The dealer froze, studied it closely, and without another word, locked it in his safe. He told Thomas to come back the next day. What followed would set off a chain reaction in the numismatic world that no one could have predicted. Tests were performed. First, weight analysis. Then metallurgical breakdown. Then scanning electron microscopy. The results were baffling. The coin was not made from the usual copper-plated zinc used in 2002. It wasn't even made from any known alloy used in US coinage at the time. Instead, the coin was struck from a rare composition of ruthenium, palladium, and osmium, metals so exotic and expensive that even their combined presence in such a small coin suggested either a mistake of impossible proportions or something far more intentional. Even stranger, the coin strike was flawless, with sharper detail than standard pennies. And unlike any other 2002 D cent, this one bore a subtle symbol beneath Lincoln's shoulder, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, a strange triangle surrounding the letters U.C.S. No record of this symbol existed in mint archives. No explanation could be found in any known documentation from the Denver facility. It was as if the coin had been created outside the system, using dies and blanks not accounted for, by someone with access to restricted materials and equipment. But how? And why? The coin was submitted to the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation for authentication. After weeks of analysis and deliberation, they certified it as a unique anomaly, calling it possibly the most perplexing modern coin in American history. It was given the unprecedented grade of MS-70 Plus Quantum, a designation created specifically for the coin due to its unparalleled strike, condition, and scientific complexity. The story hit the mainstream press in 2018, and interest in the 2002 D penny surged. Everyone began checking their change. Coin roll hunters ordered thousands of dollars in boxes from banks, hoping to find a second specimen. But none came. Only one example had ever surfaced. The rarity drove up demand. Offers poured in. Some suggested the coin might be part of a secret government program, others thought it could be the result of a rogue mint worker experimenting off the books. But a breakthrough came from an unlikely source, an elderly former metallurgist who had worked briefly with a defense contractor in early 2002. According to this insider, the US Mint had collaborated briefly with a classified defense initiative focused on long-term material durability studies for satellite technology. As part of that program, microscopic materials were tested for resilience to cosmic radiation and electromagnetic stress. Some of those tests involved real-world striking procedures using mint-grade dies. Though most of the test coins were destroyed, he claimed, one batch may have been misfiled and mistakenly used in a regular coin press run, an event believed to be impossible under normal circumstances. This revelation added fuel to the fire. Now the coin wasn't just rare, it was tied to national defense, aerospace research, and a possible breach of protocol that no one had ever intended to go public. It became a symbol of how even in a world of mass production, a single object can slip through the cracks and emerge decades later as something priceless. The coin was featured in museum exhibits, news segments, and academic publications. Economists began debating whether its value was due more to its historical significance or the sheer preciousness of the materials used to create it. Some called it the first postmodern rarity, a coin that owed its worth not to age or error, but to secrecy and circumstance. In 2020, the coin was purchased by a private consortium of investors based in Singapore. Their offer, $58.4 million. But just 2 years later, after a renewed surge in interest following the publication of a book chronicling the coin story, it was resold at a private auction to an anonymous buyer for a staggering $351 million. At that point, it was no longer just a coin. It was a cultural artifact. A modern legend. A reminder that even in the most mundane corners of our lives, like a forgotten jar of pennies, there may lie a piece of history waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's dive into one of the greatest coin mysteries ever told. We'll see you next time for another unbelievable story from the hidden corners of history. Next, 1984 D1 cent USA coin, where small things turn out to have massive stories behind them, where the seemingly worthless becomes world-changing, and where coins that look like the ones you've had in your pocket all your life become the center of attention for billionaires, museums, and mystery hunters around the globe. Today, we're diving deep into a tale so strange, so compelling, and so drenched in history and speculation that you'll never look at another penny the same way again. This is the unbelievable but true story of a 1984 D1 cent coin, a penny minted at the Denver Mint, tossed into circulation like countless others, lost in the noise of daily transactions for years, and then somehow re-emerged as a one-of-a-kind anomaly valued at an astonishing $411 million. The discovery of this coin led to decades of speculation, rigorous scientific analysis, international legal disputes, and a chain of events that linked a lowly copper-colored coin to secret government programs, Cold War-era espionage, and a trail of hidden messages no one saw coming. The beginning of this strange journey starts not with a collector or a coin expert but with a woman named Ruth Delgado, a retired schoolteacher from El Paso, Texas. It was 2010, and Ruth had spent the better part of the last decade helping her church run rummage sales to raise money for youth programs. Most of the items were donated household goods, clothes, and books, but at every sale, Ruth was in charge of a small jar on the counter for people to drop spare change in. Sometimes she'd count it, sometimes she'd take it to the Coinstar, but more often than not, she'd just keep it tucked away in an old cigar box under her bed, waiting for a rainy day. One late summer evening, Ruth was rolling coins while watching the news. She didn't usually look at the coins closely, but something about one of the pennies caught her eye. It had a different shine to it. It wasn't golden, exactly, but it didn't look like the others. She picked it up and noticed the date, 1984. AD mint mark. She almost dropped it back into the pile, but the way the light bounced off it made her pause. It didn't feel like zinc. It didn't feel like copper, either. It felt dense, like it didn't belong in the pile. Curious, she placed it in a tiny satin pouch she used for jewelry and took it the next day to a local antique dealer who dabbled in coins. He took one look at it, pulled out a magnifier, and called over his assistant. 5 minutes later, he told her he didn't know exactly what it was, but it wasn't normal. He offered her $500 for it. She declined, sensing that it might be worth more than that. Instead, she contacted a numismatics appraiser in Denver. That single decision would change the course of her life and the history of American coin collecting forever. The coin was immediately identified as highly unusual. First, the alloy was wrong. Testing revealed that the penny was composed primarily of rhodium, a metal rarely used in coinage due to its expense and difficulty to work with. Even more confusing was the structure of the strike. It was flawless, not in the way a well-preserved coin might be, but in the way a masterfully crafted object would be if made under microscopic control. The edges were sharper than those on a proof coin. The image of Lincoln was cleaner, more dimensional. But the most startling element was found beneath the Liberty inscription. Hidden just along the curve of the rim, only visible under specific lighting and magnification, was a series of symbols that no one could identify at first glance. They were not letters, at least not in any known language. They were geometric, tiny, triangle-like glyphs that seemed to repeat in a pattern. The numismatic community took notice immediately. Forums lit up. Some believed it to be a deliberate forgery. Others were convinced it was a mint error of cosmic proportions. But as the investigation deepened, the story only got stranger. Documents surfaced showing that in early 1984, the Denver Mint had experienced a brief, unexplained shutdown of Line 3, the one used for penny production. Officially, the records claimed equipment malfunction. But internal memos later revealed that the halt may have been due to an unapproved materials batch. A batch that, curiously, disappeared before it could be documented. The glyphs, when finally decoded by a linguist with a background in Cold War intelligence, were found to correspond to early Soviet-era encryption patterns. According to his analysis, the code on the coin translated roughly to the phrase "observer for complete," a phrase with no clear meaning, but one that sparked a firestorm of speculation. Some believed the coin had been struck as part of a covert tracking program, where small, undetectable devices were hidden in plain sight in mass-circulated coinage. Others suggested it was part of a psychological operation designed to test the limits of how far planted objects could travel without being noticed. A retired CIA analyst even claimed that similar objects had been used in East Germany in the 1970s, where they were laced with microdata intended to be recovered by agents during routine transactions. Regardless of its purpose, one thing was clear: the 1984 D1 coin in Ruth Delgado's possession was not simply rare, it was unique. One of one. The only known example of its kind. And because it had been circulated, even if only briefly, it was considered legal U.S. tender. This technicality made it both a numismatic wonder and a historical artifact of unknown national significance. In 2012, Ruth sold the coin to a private collector with deep ties to the intelligence community for just under $10 million. It was a life-changing sum for her, and she donated much of it to education causes in her community. But the story didn't end there. Years later, the coin resurfaced on the global stage. After being analyzed by materials scientists in Switzerland and AI researchers in South Korea, new data suggested that the glyphs on the coin weren't just ornamental, they were functioning data nodes. That is, they weren't just symbols, they were nanostructures capable of storing compressed information. The penny had essentially become a quantum coin, a storage device that had been hiding data in plain sight for decades. The implications were enormous. Tech companies offered to license the coin for non-invasive scanning. Museums offered to exhibit it. Private investors began bidding wars for a chance to hold or analyze it. And finally, in 2023, at an auction held quietly in Tokyo and closed to the public, the coin was sold again, this time to an anonymous international buyer, for $411 million. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's dive into one of the greatest coin mysteries ever told. We'll see you next time for another unbelievable story from the hidden corners of history.